Morning everybody, it's Claire here again, and today we are going to continue with the sewing project that we've got underway at the moment, which is some bunting for a lovely little boy called Albie. The bunting is going to be a gift for my daughter Lucinda to give to her friend Sophie, who is Albie's mother. So congratulations to Sophie on the arrival of Albie, and we hope that she'll enjoy hanging and using this bunting in baby's bedroom or wherever she chooses to put it. Okay, so this point now we are on to the lettering. So that's the next thing that you need to get organised. So to do this I used Word, Microsoft Word, but obviously you can use any program you like. You can find lots of different fonts on the internet, and they're very easy to find, from chalk painted to script to block letters, whatever you like. Generally it's all there. What you need to do is you need to find a font that you like, and then you need to enlarge those individual letters. Now you are not restricted in Microsoft Word to the size of letters that are automatically shown in the drop down box. The letters that I have chosen is the Ariel font because it's nice and blocked, so it's not too tricky with lots of different corners to get round. And this is the one that I've chosen, and it's as you can see, it's very blocked, which is great, so nice and clear. And I've enlarged this at the size 325, so that's 325. So normally you'd have a 10 or a 12 for your normal letter writing, but this one, as I say, has been printed out at 325. It's just an ordinary photocopier paper at the moment, which is great, because what we actually need to do is we need to reverse the letters, because when we go to sew them down or cut them out in our fabric, we need them to be a certain way round, and unfortunately you can waste some fabric sometimes trying to sort this out, but hopefully I can help you and we can get it through. So go ahead, choose your letters that you need. If whilst you're there, I would recommend you print out the whole alphabet, because it'll save you a lot of time in the future. You don't need to remember the settings. Once you've got them all sorted, just save it in a plastic wallet like this one, and then you've always got it, and it'll last you for years, because you don't actually cut these letters out, you just use them to draw around. So with that in mind, go find your program, get your letters printed out onto your piece of paper, and then we'll be moving on to the next step. Once you have your letters all printed out, the next thing we're going to need is something called Bondaweb. Now this is like the old Wonder Web that people used to use for putting up, using for hemming trousers, where you can fold it over and it makes the two sides of the fabric stick together. These days, and for Applique, you can now buy it on a roll. And this is really useful because it's got a glued mesh on one side, if you can see that's kind of shiny side, and on the other side it's got paper. So for Applique this is fabulous, because what we do is we trace the letters onto the paper side with a pencil, and we cut them out with a seam allowance around them, or a little bit extra around them, and then we can then stick this one-sided onto our fabric. And what that does is it just means that it makes the fabric then self-adhesive in effect, but only with an iron. So the heat from the iron melts this lattice of glue. I don't know if you can see that on there, but it melts this lattice of glue, and then it just sticks it on the back. I'll explain more as we go along, so that you understand what I mean. And what I do is I keep my spare pieces. Sometimes it looks like this as well, which is a very fine one, but this is where the papers come off the back. But you definitely want one. I've got a bigger piece here. Look, we can probably use this piece actually rather than cut a new piece off the roll. And as you can hear, the paper is crinkly, but it means you can draw on the back of it, and then you've got the two sides there. Look, paper, and then the little fine web. So ideally you want something where it shouldn't peel off like this. This one's a little bit dry because I've had it for a while, but for the purposes of this project it'll be absolutely great. So what I'll do is we're going to take our letters and our Bondaweb up to a window, and we're going to stick our letters onto the window so that we can see through them, but we want to trace the letters back to front. So I'll explain more as we move along. So that's the next step. Okay, so I've taken myself off to a window, find one that you've got in your house, obviously you've got plenty. And what I've done is I've used some masking tape just to go on the corners. Now, what I've done is I've put the masking tape on the back of the page, and then what we want to do is stick, oh, get this the right way around, stick the picture onto the the letters onto the window. If you do them in order, it's easier, so that you don't get lost, but it depends. I mean, we've got 3 on here that we need. And what you can see is that sometimes on a less sunny day, you need to just go round the edges. It just makes it easier to follow for you. But if not, and I've got quite a bright day here in Spain at the moment, then we can just put it straight onto the window. What we're going to do then is take our piece of fusible web, and I'm going to put the glue side, which is the rough and even side, against the letters. Now we're trying to use this as economically as possible, but you do need to put your bonder web a little bit over the edge of the letters, because when these letters are cut out, we want the glue to go right to the very edges, and if you don't stick it onto your fabric with a little bit over the edge, sometimes there's a chance to miss it. So for this, all we're going to do now is literally just trace off the letters. I tend to do the horizontal line, vertical lines first. So that we can see what's happening on here. And we're going to get those on. So if I just pull that slightly away, you can see my letter is on the back there. And that letter is back to front. So this is exactly how I want. Some letters are symmetrical, like the A will be symmetrical. That doesn't matter, that's the same either way. But you do need them to be cut out or to be traced off the wrong way round. It'll all make sense, I promise. So again, we're just tracing these letters just with a little bit of space around the edge of them. That's perfect, just so we've got a bit of room. So just bear with me while I just go ahead and change this over. Literally just peel this off. And if you use something like a masking tape, you don't get any residue left on your windows, so it doesn't mean you give yourself another job of having to clean your windows off afterwards. Just peels straight off. Just change this over. Just really quickly. As you see, it's really easy to do once you've gotten the hang of it, and it might take you a couple of times just to get to the where you like to work. But as you can see, we can see through those letters really easily. They are reversed for me. They don't look it on the camera, but they are for me. So again, we're going to try and use this bonder web as economically as possible, because it does cost quite a lot of money. Don't worry if you're not too neat, because we can neaten these up again at the edge. At the end. So A, L, B, so we need an I as well. I know is straightforward, but we want it in proportion with the rest of the letters. So we'll just switch this over. As I say, these letters, because you're not cutting them out, you can use them time and time again. So I know it sounds a lot printing off all 26 letters when you've maybe only got a quick bit of bunting to do, but actually if you do it straight away, then you do actually save yourself quite a lot of time. So we can put that on one side just like that. Okay, oh no, let's put it here, be more economical here. I'm a big fan of saving money where we can. Crafting supplies are expensive enough, and this is a nice project to do, so we want to make it go as far as possible. Still leaving a bit of room around the letters, as you can see, so that we can cut around those when we stick them onto our fabric. Okay, so that's it for the letters. So now when you cut these letters out, don't cut on the lines. You need to cut them out so that you've got just 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch just around the edges, and that will then mean that the glue goes right to the edges of your letters for your applique. But this is an example of a letter that I've cut around already. Ooh, light's too much. So we can see that it's wrong way round. Well, it's looking right way round to you, but it's the wrong way round because the glue's on the back. And I've just got to be careful because the wonderweb is coming off the back of here, the wonderweb. But when you cut it out, when you get your small little pieces, like this little bit here that was fitting inside here somehow, then what I would recommend you do is just save these little pieces, because if you do applique projects in the future, or if you're a bit tight one month, you can actually stick these together on the back of your fabric pieces as well, so that they will merge together. So don't think that's just waste and just throw it away. Save it, and I've just got a little ice cream tub that I just put things in like that, and you can save it for another day, and it just keeps nicely in your project box, in craft room, and you can save it. So again, let's be frugal while we can. As I say, save the planet while we can. Okay, on to the next bit. For this project, for our bunting, we have chosen 3 fabrics that we're going to use. We're going to use the chevrons for the actual flags themselves. We're going to use the grey check here for the letters, and then I've got some backing fabric. Now this can be muslin fabric, or it can be just an old sheeting. You need something with a little, and this one's actually curtain lining fabric, which I find works really well, as well as the muslin, really well. So on here it's quite a little bit stiffer. So once you've chosen what your words, obviously you know what your letter's going to be, but once you've chosen your fabrics, you then want to make sure that you get the scale right. So in terms of our letters and our fabrics, I personally feel that the chevrons would not be suited for the letters because the pattern on it is too big, whereas the letters will look really lovely in this grey check because the pattern is smaller. So just be aware of that when you're choosing. I'm not saying don't ever use a larger pattern, especially if it's a contrast colour, but just be aware that when you're using them, just think of the scale of the letters that you're using, because we've obviously got our letters here. So here's our B. And on there you're going to miss some of the chevron pattern just because these lines here aren't very big. But by contrast, if we actually put that onto the grey, we can see we're going to pick up quite a lot of the detail of that check. So just be aware of that when you're choosing what to do. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is the thickness and the structure of the fabric. So some of the quilting cottons can be particularly soft, and that's fabulous for making your quilts and clothing, because that's what you want. You want something nice, soft and easy to wear and comfortable. But when we're making bunting, it can make it a bit flimsy, and I like quite a structured bunting on mine. I want it to feel substantial. So what I tend to do is I tend to try and match up the fabric qualities, I suppose is the right word. So what I will do is I will actually interface these the flags on here, so we'll do that a bit later. But the other thing that you might need to consider is that if your fabric for your letters is not densely printed, say it was a lot much larger, as you put your letters onto your fabric, you're going to see straight through them. So one thing you do need to consider, I mean, especially here, you can see there that the problem is there. So if you had like a floral on the back of a white or a pink or a blue, then you know you need to just be aware of whether you're going to see through it or not, because we don't want that other fabric from underneath to show through. Now with this one, I think we'll be okay, because once I put the backing fabric on it, it does block out some of it. I've obviously got the light behind me at the moment, but when it's lying down on my work surface, I can't see through that. So just be aware of that with your letters, because if you needed to, now would be the time to take your piece of fabric that you're going to use for your letters and then just iron on some iron-on interfacing on the back. Some, if you do dressmaking, then you'll know exactly what I mean. It's just a stiffener slightly, but it just makes the fabric a little bit more opaque. So I might well do that just on here, just to be belt and braces, because the last thing you want is to go to all the trouble of tracing off your letters, get everything all ready, and then find that you've got bleed through of your pattern through to your fabric, onto your bunting. So I'm just going to interface this. I've already ironed it, so it's nice and smooth, and I've also put some spray starch on it as well, because that just helps the fabric stay in shape and not pull out of shape. And in actual fact, these letters I am actually going to do on the bias, so it's going to be sideways. The check is going to be going diagonally rather than up and down, because I think that's, especially when you're doing straight lines with your stitches, it can just really look quite nice as a cross hatch, whereas if you're doing it straight up and down, you've got to get your lines absolutely straight in your stitching, and just sometimes just life doesn't allow us to do that. So yeah, I'm going to just go ahead and just pop some interfacing, iron-on interfacing, lightweight, light or medium weight is fine, and just pop it on the back of the lettering fabric. So I'll do that and I'll come back to you. Okay, I'm making this little bit a bit too complicated, but just bear with me because it's just the way that I'm going to do it for today. Because I like to try and preserve as much fabric as I can do, then I don't want to stick interface into all of it, because I might want to use it for lining a bag or for making something dressmaking wise. So what I choose to do is I've actually laid my letters onto my fabric in the orientation that I want them, because then what I've been able to do is then match up the letters onto the fabric on the diagonal. It's just off screen slightly, sorry about that. Don't want to show you all my messy craft room. But what it does is it just means that I'm not going to waste too much fabric. So I'm going to go ahead, and it's going to look a bit odd when I iron this on. This is the interfacing that I'm using, very, very lightweight. It looks a little bit like the mesh, but it hasn't got the paper sided. It's just got a little bit of a fabric. So it's gluey on one side, which you can feel is the rough side, and you put the glue side down to your fabric. And you can overlap it slightly as well, especially on this thinner one, because that's not going to make too much difference. But just make sure you move your letters out of the way so you don't iron those on in the wrong place to your fabric, because I have done that before. Easy done. Overlap your interfacing slightly, make sure you're over the edges of the fabric, otherwise you'll be wasting some. And again, I save the offcuts of the interfacing, and for little projects like this, when you need just a little bit like this, you can actually just raid your spare stash, and you'll have the pieces you need without having to waste a whole lot. I also use an ironing cloth when I'm ironing over interfacing, or over the not of the paper but over the interfacing. This is silk organza, which is very, very easy and robust to use. This one's a bit battered now, but it works perfectly. It helps your iron glide, and rather than ruck up the fabric. Also, with it being silk organza, you can see straight through it, so you can actually see exactly where you want to be placed. So again, I've just got a hot iron, and I'm just going to put the interfacing onto the back of the fabric. If you want to, you can use a little bit of steam. Some products say don't use steam, so just be aware of that, but I know that this one works really well with it. And you're trying to just give time for that to adhere onto your fabric. Okay, off comes the, and as we can see, hopefully, we can, oh, you can't see on there very well, but there I can see the difference between, oh, you can see there, look, the difference between the two layers where the interfacing's been ironed on and then where it isn't. So the next step then is to take our letters, and as I said, we're going to put these on the diagonal. So we want these at 45 degrees to the check. Again, we're going up to the edges but not over the edges, and we're trying to get those letters just nice. You can measure from either side if you wanted to as well, just to make sure you've got it on the diagonal. So from one line to the edge, just over 2.5, one line to the edge, that's not quite straight. Or if you've got a 45-degree ruler, you can use that as well. So here we're going to just cut out some of this so that the stick of the eye can fit into where we need it to. Making sure that the glue stays in place on the back where you need it. Okay, I need to move this across slightly because it's going to overlap. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now let's just put the bee on, which is just going to go just here. Again, I'm going to use my pressing cloth. It just makes sure that everything stays nice and neat. And as you can see, these will then go onto the fabric. So I'll start with the eye. I'm just going to not use steam on this bit, so get rid of the steam. We just want to just press down, and we're pressing now, not ironing. So we're just doing little pressing downward movements, and that's just going to adhere the glue, melt the glue enough that it just sticks onto the fabric. But we're trying not to get any ripples in that. Once it's stuck down, you can smooth over a little bit. Try not to over iron, but you do want to be able to stick. And also just leave them to dry and the heat just to cool off before you remove your fabric, because again, as you can see, that's just stuck slightly, which is why we use our press cloth, because we don't want the residue to be on the bottom of our iron, because that's really tricky to get off. Okay, so for now we have our letters adhered onto our fabric, and they look right way around to you, don't they? But they're backwards to me. And then so we'll work through on that. Okay, thank you. So I've just been cutting out some flags, but I was talking to myself because the camera had switched itself off. So I have 5 already done, but I have suggested to Lucy to check with the mum whether or not they wanted any extra letters on the sides. Sometimes I've put hearts on either side if it's a shorter name. Also, you can put a star as well, which is quite nice, or any of the shape that you like, just to add to the extra length of the flags. It is extra, but it just does help set it nicely. So all I was saying before I was rudely ignored by the camera was that on your pattern, on your template, what you can do is, because the flag, this is a geometric shape, you can turn your pattern upside down as you're moving along. So I can demonstrate it with these ones that have already been cut, because you can have 2 flags that way. Just move these across slightly so you can see them better. But then your 3rd flag is cut out from the space in the middle. So when these are laid down properly, you can see that you can get these 3 flags from a much smaller piece of fabric than if you were just cutting them all out this way with a lot of waste. So again, just think of ways of using your fabric. Just be careful though, because I mean, this is okay because this is your lining fabric for the back of the bunting, but if you were using a directional print like your chevrons, where's my chevron fabric gone? So like your chevrons, you can use this one up and down, but you couldn't use it sideways and straight up, because the pattern would be different, and we would need that pattern to be straight across all the way. So just be aware of that. It will take extra fabric to do that, but it's worth it to get the pattern matched up because it will look lovely. So what I'm going to do now is cut out another 2 just to show you how I did these. And then if Lucy wants them, she can do. If not, I'll save them for another project in the future. So I've cut out the last one, that one, and I need 2 more. So I'm going to tip my template around the other way. I'm avoiding the selvage edge, the knitted selvage edge. I'm going to put my template up against the edge of the flag. I'll tell you what, I'll do this side first, because then that will give us an edge to work to. And I'm just going to run my rotary cutter across the edge, and then hopefully without the fabric moving, and without the template moving, I can just line that up on the edge, remove the template, and I can cut across my flag without it shifting. So that's another one. And then to do the next one, if I could manage to squeeze it on, don't know the technique, oh I might be able to on that one. Do you know, I'm going to be lucky and just squeeze it on. So what I'm going to do is line my template up properly. Ooh, they do like to shift. You can probably get templates like this in acrylic, which would be really handy if you're going to be making lots of bunting. And as I say before, you could always draw around it if you wanted to before you cut it as well. But I've found that sometimes when you've made them a few times you can cut a few steps. There's 2 extra cut out anyway, just to show you how I did those. Hopefully I've not been in the way too much. So I'm just cutting out my flags on the patterned fabric, and what I've noticed is that something that you find quite often actually, and you do need to just look out for this, is that the pattern isn't entirely square. I know it's triangles, but they're not square. So I can see that I've lined up my bottom, top and bottom, so the middle of the bottom and the middle of the top is at the same point. And when I fold these across, they match up beautifully in terms of the sides. However, what you'll notice is that the zigzag going across the top is actually off, because we've got a little bit there, but look how these disappear here going across. So I'd lined it up going straight the way top to bottom, so vertically, but actually I needed to pay attention as well horizontally. I just presumed it was going to be square, and it isn't. I've done another one, and I think this is about as good as I can get with the pattern without wasting too much. It does line up, and again we're sort of just slightly off down the bottom, but I think it'll be fine once they're all laid out together. So again, just trying to be aware of how these match up, these flags match up, because anything that isn't quite right is absolutely going to show up when they're hanging on the wall. So I'm paying attention to the tops of the triangles across the whole top of the piece. And if I do that, the bottom square is just slightly off. Now we can straighten a little bit of that up with the sewing, because we've got a little bit of leeway with the seam allowance at the bottom. So I'm just going to put my ruler on again. Cut that across. And blade away whilst my face is quite close to it. And again, just cutting just slightly over the edge of the flag. See, that just lifts away. And then whilst we hold our flag in place, we can take off the excess off the edge and the little bit on the end. So I've popped these down. We can see hopefully that we've tried to be careful, and that the zigzags are all nicely lined up and nicely going across. So I'll go ahead now and cut out the others, and we will then meet back here and look at placement of letters onto flags. So here we are then. We have our pieces of our fabric curtain lining that have been cut out in our triangle shape. We've got 5 of those for each of our letters of other name. We've also got our flags, which have been interfaced to give them a little bit more stiffness, and they're all ready and lined out. We've lined those up as best as we can. And we have our letters all ready to go as well. So what we're going to do next is we're going to just position the letters onto the flag. So if we just take one at a time. And what we can do is, when we lay these all out, you will see how the difference in the letters affects where you need to place them. However, we need them all to be the same, but some letters are wider than others. So like with an I, you know, we could place that anywhere along and it's not going to interfere with the side seams at all. But if we look at a letter like a B, we can see we've got much less spare on the sides, and again the A is quite wide as well, so we just need to be careful with those. We know we've lined at the centre of our template up with one of the lines on the pattern, so we know that that is going to be straight. So let's look at the eye first. I suppose that's the easiest one to work with, isn't it? So we have our eye, which is straight up, straight down, and we have our flag as well. So we want to get the centre of the eye and the centre of the bottom of the eye on the line that we've got going down. Now we need to just be aware of where these sit. I have found that 1 inch to 1.5 inches from the top is a really good place to start with placement of the letters. So I've just lined that up as 1.5 inches down. So let's now move on to one of the wider letters. It's not stuck down yet, it's just sitting there on top. So if we again put our quilting ruler on the top of the letter and line the centre mark up on our thing, we can fold our B in half to find out where it's going to sit symmetrically. So we've got a little bit of a line just going down the centre there now. Okay, that's working all right on there. I can see that we've got some space here and here either side, enough for our 1/4 inch seam to go across. So 1.5 inches might actually work on these ones. So again, it's worth taking your time just to get your placement sorted, because once these are stuck down, you're going to have to start again with your letters in order to make a new set. And that just wastes time and fabric really, doesn't it, for you? So again, if this one's laid up in half and half again on there, yeah, I'm happy with that one too. So I'm thinking 1.5 inches down might be about right. They all have to be the same, because otherwise you're going to have a zigzaggy effect on your lettering when it's hung up, and you might not notice it when you're really close and working on it on your workstation. But when you actually hang it up and look at it from a distance, you want everybody to be looking at your bunting for the right reasons and not because it's all off on the letters. Now that one's quite close. The A has only got a smidge, probably only not far off 1/4 inch on either side. So I'm not happy with that. So I'm going to lose the 1/2 inch, and I think I'm going to just put the bunting 1 inch down from the top. That then moves everything up, and that gives us a much better clearance on either side of the A. So you do have to be careful to make sure that what letters you've got are perfectly lined up and that they all work across, because otherwise you get halfway through and then you have to start again, and as I say, it's a waste of time and fabric. So once you know where you want your placement to be, so we know we want the symmetrical line following the line of the point down to the tip of the flag, and we've got our letter. What we're going to do now is, if you hold it so the fabric side is down and just push on a corner, the paper comes away from the back of the sticky plastic, and you can just peel the 2 strips away. Okay, so that's the paper that we drew on, and then this is our fabric, and it's got a little layer of self-adhesive glue on the back there. It isn't sticky at the moment, it's dry at the moment, so it will move around. But let's place that. So we're going 1 inch from the top, and we're going to line up the centre of the top of the A with the point of the chevrons going down. So I've just got that lined up perfectly. You can put a pin in if you want to, but if you're really careful you can move it to your ironing board without a problem. So what I'm going to do now is just move that out the way, hold it really nice and tightly. I'm going to move across to my ironing board, and my iron is switched on. Pop it down on my ironing board. I can feel that that's not moved, so I'm quite happy. I'm going to put my pressing cloth over the top, and I'm going to press. And literally, I'm just going to hold it down just for a few seconds. And that will adhere the letter to the bunting. So take that off, and we can now move this around, and the letter's stuck on very nicely. So that's where we are at the moment with this with the lettering. What's going to happen next is we're going to actually stitch around the edges of the bunting, stitch around the edges of the letters, so that it stitches it on and it covers those raw edges. You could leave it like it is if you wanted to do it quick and it's just a quick project. But it is worth taking the time just to go around the edges, so that's what I'm going to do in a minute once I've got all these lined up. I will move the camera so that you can see me pressing this on as well, but for now we have the A done. So let's line up the B. So we know we're going 1 inch from the top, so we line our ruler with the line on our ruler with the top of our flag. We also know that we want to use the centre here, so I've just lined up one of the dark lines with the centre of my letter. I've taken my letter in half so I know where the half point is, and just be careful because sometimes some of your letters don't always go across the top just to delineate the top. Line your crease mark in your letter with the top and make sure that it's hitting the right point you want it to on the bottom as well. Okay, that looks about right. I'm happy with that. Okay, so what we need to do is we just need to take the paper off the back, press on a corner, it just takes it off. Peel the paper away from the letter and discard that, and then just reposition it so that we're happy. Just need to go across there a little bit more. Yep, I'm happy with that now. So just smooth it down on your work. You can remove the thing now, and we'll move that across to the ironing board. If you pinch it in your finger and thumb, it'll hold it. It should hold it enough for you just to be able to move it across. So I'll just move that across now to the ironing board. So here we are at the ironing board, and I've got my letter lined up. I'm happy with the placement, it's not moved. I need to put the pressing cloth over the top, and that will just protect the fabric as well from burning. I can see through it, so I know exactly where I'm going to be pressing. And then with the hot iron, I just put it on medium to hot iron, just put it over the top of the letter. Just stick it down. Just activate, the heat activates the glue, and then when we go to lift it up, the letter is stuck on there. And as that dries, it just gets nicely positioned. So again, that's all nicely on the edge. Okay, so we have all of our letters now stuck onto our flags. The next stage now is to determine what thread we're going to use to stitch these letters round. If the baby bedroom has a certain accent colour, perhaps in this case it's a grey and white bedroom scheme, but perhaps it's a yellow or a blue, turquoise or a red, then you could always use those colours to go around your letters. In this case I'm going to keep it neutral, and we're just going to stick with the grey and white theme, so I'm just going to get a couple of threads to try and see which colour is going to look best. Now this is where our sample bits come in, because I've got a little offcut of the chevron fabric, and we've got a little offcut of the checked fabric. So what I'm going to do is just marry those two together, because that's going to then become our sample piece for working out which thread to use and which stitch width we need. So we're just going to use the straight edge that's got some glue on it, which is that one I think, and I'm just going to adhere that down onto there with just a bit of a gap. Just there, it doesn't have to be precise, it's, as I say, it's just for testing. So that's going to be our sample piece. So let me just stick that down, and then finally we'll be ready to do some sewing.